Hello and welcome to the Deb Calvert channel here on Bright Talk. I want to start out just by thanking you. I really appreciate those of you who are coming back month after month and those of you who are contacting me in between for deeper dive discussions about these topics that are relevant for HR professionals and for managers and for emerging leaders. We're just taking a fresh look at some topics that seem to have a lot of broad appeal. Today, in this session, our objective is to help you strengthen your leadership capacity by providing you with some new tools for creative problem solving. And I think this is a really appropriate topic at this time because all of us are facing new and more challenging problems every day. And if you're like most people, you probably have relied on just one or two methods for solving problems. You either talk to people to get ideas and to bring in the list of experience, or solve a problem by software, or you've used in the past, or you've heard about from somebody that you know and trust. So what's wrong with those two approaches? Well, inherently, those two approaches limit your ability to find the right solution. In fact, they might not be producing any solution at all. Let me come back to that. Let me explain a little bit more about what I mean and about why we need some new tools and new ways to solve problems. First, let me introduce this platform and myself. For those of you who are new to Bright Talk, welcome. You're going to find that this is an easy platform to use. You can go straight to the orange button that says Get Live Support Now anytime you want to put something in there and ask for some help. Bright Talk is super responsive and they'll come right in and be able to help you. For those of you who are new to Bright Talk, you also might not know that there is a place here where you can get some bonus content. There are some attachments and I've added them up, loaded them up for you. I'll reference them as we go through. The first one that you might want to know about is that I've included some of all of the slides away. I know some of you like doing that. The other content that I've put on there includes a link to my LinkedIn profile. I would genuinely like to connect with you and to keep the conversation going beyond our time together today. You are welcome to post questions at any time. I'll try to take them in the natural order of things as we go through the presentation. I'll certainly answer any questions I can at the end. And you know that you can connect with me on LinkedIn or email me directly. I'd be happy to answer your questions one-to-one as well. So last thing about Bright Talk, which is helpful to me. If you wouldn't mind leaving a little feedback, a review with some comments so I know what you like or what you'd like to see different in the future, I really appreciate that very much. I am Deb Calvert and my company is called People First Productivity Solutions. We work to build organizational strength by putting people first. Now let's come back to those two approaches I mentioned for problem solving. Either you go to people you know who have more experience, or you try a solution, one that you know has worked in the past. It's tried and it's true. You've seen it or you've done it before. But I said you're inherently limited if those are the two approaches that you're taking to problem solving. And that's because the world is changing so fast. What used to work might not work anymore. Or what any one of us has in our own limited purview might not be enough to solve the complex and emerging problems that we all face. So new problems, they might require some new ways of thinking, and that's what I'm going to challenge us to consider today. But before we rush to any solution, before we try to tackle any problem, we're going to take a step back, because this is really the first thing to do anytime we're faced with a problem. At all, it's really important to step back and make sure that we're solving the right problem. See, when we react to the wrong problem, a lot of times we end up making decisions or taking actions that only create more problems. I'll give you a situation where this happened. Feeling a little vulnerable to tell you this, but maybe some of you can relate. So a few months ago, I realized that my pants were getting a little bit too tight. So you know what I did? I went shopping, and I bought a few new things in a different size than I'm used to wearing. Now, in retrospect, what problem did I solve? Well, I solved the problem of getting clothes that fit better. But what problem should I have been solving? Well, it was a problem about stepping back and being honest with myself and getting back to some healthier eating and some exercise habits that I've been neglecting. If all we do is buy new pants, we're not evaluating and solving the right problem. We are worried more about the immediacy and the quick fix that only masks the real problem. And this happens all the time in work teams. I do a lot of work with teams, and oftentimes I get called. The call goes something like this: "Hey, Deb, can you come and give us a fun team event? We need to do some team building." You know, I can do that, but I won't because a one-day off-site retreat to have a little fun together with your team, that might not really be what you need. There might be something underlying, under the surface. If the team is unhappy, if they're complaining, if morale is bad, if trust has been breached and people aren't connecting, if there's a lot of conflict, that one day off-site, that's just going to make you and me both look like ostriches with our heads in the sand who are unwilling or unable to really get to the root cause of a problem. So anytime you have a problem, what you'll need to identify is this: what's the desired outcome? When you make a decision, when you make a change, what is it that you want to see different as a result of that decision? And when you really peel back the onion, you look at all the layers, you get right down to the root cause of the problem, what you're doing is framing the problem. Framing the problem is super important. You're going to save a lot of time in the long run if you'll take time to frame the problem to make sure that it's this problem that really should get your time and attention. It's this problem, this root cause of the problem, that if you solve it, it will have an impact. It will make the difference that you want to make. And of course, you also want to think about, if you solve this problem, will it cause any other problems? Will it be neglecting some other problem that I don't really want to address? If you're having difficulty identifying the real problem, it's probably for one of these three reasons. It's probably because you're either looking at something that's past or present versus looking at the future outcomes that you want to see. So don't get mired in the present. Don't get tethered to the past. Instead, think about, what is the outcome I want? That's a really good North Star for helping you get where you want to go as you solve problems. So what are the problems that are in my way of getting there to this outcome that I really want to see? That's the problem to work on. If you're having trouble identifying the real problem, it might also be, second reason, that you're looking very narrowly at the situation. Maybe you just need to elevate, get up there above the clouds a little bit, and look at that bigger picture. Look at the interactions, look at the interplay between the problems that perhaps are needing to be looked at in tandem. And then finally, if you're having trouble solving the real, or identifying rather, the real problem, it could be because you're focusing on tertiary or tangential problems rather than getting to the root cause. You can solve a whole lot of little problems, the daily conflicts, the fact that people feel bad about the work they're doing, the fact that a few of them want to bolt and leave the team, the fact that the work never seems to get to a reasonable level. Right? You can focus on all of those things. You can don your superhero cape and swoop in to try to solve all those reactive types of situations without ever getting to the root cause, and it's exhausting. If you're interested and you want to learn more about problem identification and getting to the real problem, what we're actually talking about here is critical thinking. And I've given you a link to a 40-part video series. That's not as bad as it sounds. Most of the videos are only about 5 minutes. And they're topical, so you can find the ones you want. But it's a 40-part video series, a playlist, all about critical thinking. So help yourself to that if you feel like that's something you want to explore a little bit more. But let's talk about solving the problem. Once you identify it, in order to solve it, there are some things that you need. You need to have that clear understanding of the real problem. And then once you know what that real problem is, you need to know who owns it, who ultimately has accountability for it, because that's someone you're going to need to involve or delegate this to. Maybe you don't need to be involved. Maybe it's all and solely that person's problem. You need to understand the impact. Is this really a big problem? Is it really worth the time and the effort? Or is it a small problem magnified by something else? So here we are back to identifying and sorting it out. Just be sure that that you've got the real problem and that it's got the impact that's big enough to make it worth addressing. And then finally, here we are to our outcomes. What will it mean if you solve this problem? What difference will it make to you and to others who are impacted? You're going to get all of this information, think it through critically, because the whole point is that you want to think differently about the problem so that you can be more effective, more innovative, more creative in getting to a new place, getting that outcome that you're looking for. What happens far more often, you've probably experienced something like this, what happens more often is that people get together and they admire a problem. They go into a meeting, they talk endlessly about a problem, lamenting all the issues, talking about the difficulties without ever getting to the root cause and solving the problem. Or they compromise. So we will do this thing instead of solving the problem. Or they ignore it and it becomes bigger because it really is an elephant in the room, compromising everyone's credibility once they've compromised around the problem, because it makes us, as leaders, it makes us look weak if we're not willing and able to tackle the real problems that are causing people distress. So we might have to be willing to try something new, identifying the problem, making sure that we're tackling it head on. And what that requires, well, a couple of things. First of all, this is from the work of Dr. Carol Dweck, and if you've never read the book Mindset, it is fantastic. It's a game changer. It's a short little book. It's an important one, and I gave you a link to that here too. This is probably a good time for me to remind you that I don't believe in affiliate marketing. Anytime I make a recommendation to you, it's because I really believe that's something that could help you. So go get that book if you've never read it. I'm just giving you a snapshot of these two things that Dr. Carol Dweck's research revealed. And that is that people tend to attack problems or navigate their way through life with either a fixed mindset or a growth mindset. And I've given you a summary up there in the table. These are behaviors and feelings that are associated with each mindset, either a fixed mindset where you're avoiding challenges, you see your effort as fruitless because outside influences are in control. You might be feeling like trying new things would cause you to be too vulnerable and might make it look like you are unable to be successful and you'd never want to put yourself in that situation. That's a fixed mindset. A growth mindset is different. A person with a growth mindset understands that trying new things isn't just about the success, it's about the learning. Being able to be vulnerable and try new things and take some risks is a positive, even if you don't have immediate success. So as I'm describing these, do a little self-assessment for yourself. You'll be glad to know that those with a fixed mindset, with time and effort and habit building, can develop a growth mindset, and that unleashes creativity and innovation. It's powerful for a work team to largely have a growth mindset. Dealing with ambiguity, dealing with change, needing to solve complex problems, all of those are easier when you have a growth mindset. The other thing that sometimes gets in the way are that there are barriers. Some of these come from a fixed mindset, some of them come from the environment, but these are the sorts of things that are in the way if you or your team aren't as innovative as you'd like to be. My favorite one of these list of barriers, my favorite one is the first one, because it seems like no matter what group I'm in, there's always one person who has this automated response. They always say, oh, we did that, we've tried that, we used to. And then there's always someone else who says, oh, we can't do that because it's never been done before. And those two things can't coexist. So I sort of get amused by that and wonder how two perceptions can be so at odds. Everything else here could be in the way, but they're real situations. I do not mean to be dismissive of them. Sometimes people don't feel creative. They're tapped out. They don't have the energy. Sometimes in haste or a desire to be efficient or to get back to business as usual, people will compromise and settle for a partial solution, even if that only exacerbates the problem long term. Sometimes people are in complete denial. Sometimes their emotions cloud their objectivity and they're protective of the status quo because change is hard. By the way, we talked about change in the presentation I did here last month, and you can go back and pick that up if you want to. All of the previous content is available on demand too. Now, you're looking at this list, and you can probably see at least one thing here that you yourself have said or used to prematurely halt your own ideas. Or maybe you've been in a group where someone has been a voice against innovation or change. They might not have intended to be a voice against it, but they threw up these kinds of barriers, and it got in the way. It kept people from progressing. There's one more reason, a big one, that we need to address. One more reason that people don't try new things or don't acknowledge existing problems. And for some, this is a major barrier, and that is the fear of failure. By the way, next month, August 1st, I'm going to spend an entire presentation going deeper into this topic. So if this is you, I'm just spending a couple minutes here today, but there's more to come about this. I gave you the link so you can register for that one too if you'd like to. Okay, so fear of failure. It's a natural human state, especially when you're faced with a lot of pressures, right? At work, where we're not supposed to look like we might fail. That would be to acknowledge some sort of weakness. That's unfavorable at a time when we're competing for a raise or a new title or just to keep our job. Right? Failure seems like the last thing that we would ever want to invite. But I'd like to redefine failure. I'd like to ask you to consider thinking about it a little bit differently. I'd like you to think about failure as your teacher, just a temporary delay, a detour. You're still going to get where you're going, even if you have a failure. Failure, you know, it's part of every day. It's part of life. So it's just this little event. We can't make it ominous and bigger than it actually is. It's inevitable. And you know what? If you do nothing at all, that's the one sure, absolutely certain way to guarantee that you will fail. So we have to look at it differently. Most importantly, in the last row there, we have to own it. We have to to take the failure and own it. We have to make it our own. That's the only way that we can learn from it and do something constructive with it. In the lower right-hand box, you see one of the biggest problems when it comes to how we think about failure. It's just that we're misspelling that first word. We own it. It's your failure, Y-O-U-R. We don't use it as something that is what we are. You are not failure. A single failure, even a lot of failures throughout your life, does not make you a failure. That's an invalid way of looking at it. I really like this quote from Carol Hyatt and Linda Gottlieb. They wrote a book called When Smart People Fail. And one of the things I like that they say there is that it is how you cope with failure that shapes you, not the failure itself. How you cope with it, that means you have opportunities to learn from it. And what they say further is, if you are a learner, in other words, if you have a growth mindset, if you are a learner, it is possible, without changing the events, to make the concept of failure disappear. And I think that's really ambitious, but I've been working on this, and I've come a long way. And I have seen a lot of other people do this. As an executive coach, this topic comes up often, even with people in the C-suite. We just can't, no matter what your job, no matter what you're doing, we just can't let failure own us. We have to own the failure and be in charge of it and decide what to do with it. There's no such thing as a person who's a failure. What I'm talking about, you've probably heard it described as failing forward. And this is just a shift in perspective. This is just about the way you might think about failure. If you're like most people, your natural tendency is to feel like failure is something to avoid. It's something to hide or to be ashamed of. But the truth is that nobody, no one, succeeds the first time every time. When you think about the people that you respect and admire, you'll soon realize that what's noteworthy about them, it's not their success alone. It's how they achieved that success. It's the hardships they endured, the tenacity they exhibited, or the adversity that they overcame. And like them, we are all more likely to fail than we are to succeed. And so it's just up to us about whether or not we're going to use those failures wisely. So as you think about that, think about what to do after you fail. Don't worry so much about whether or not you're going to fail. The truth is you will, and that's okay. Instead, think about what you're going to do after you fail. Here are some ideas. First of all, depersonalize it. Don't blame others, and don't blame yourself. Blame is a pretty useless emotion. It doesn't help you to get anywhere faster. It's not very productive. So stop kicking yourself, because everybody fails. You know, Steve Jobs, he was a billionaire. He ran 2 successful companies simultaneously, Apple and Pixar. But do you remember his Next computer? The computer he had called Next? No, it failed miserably. And like Jobs, you know, we can analyze our mistakes. If we do, we'll learn something. If we don't, we won't learn anything because we're too busy beating ourselves up. So we have to analyze it. There's a reason why sports teams watch films of the game after the game. Now, they already know the outcome. They know whether they won or lost. Every single player knows what they could have done better, where they screwed up, and what they did positively to contribute to the team. So why do they watch these games even though they know all of that? It's because they want to do some analysis. That's how you capture your lessons learned, and that's how you get better the next time. You also want to redefine failure. I asked one large company how it dealt with employees' failures. And what they said to me was, we don't have failures. We have learning experiences. And I absolutely love that. At the time, I lived in Silicon Valley in California, and that's an area that breeds a lot of innovation. There are a lot of new startups there. And whenever someone has started a company that later fails, they're not considered a failure. Instead, they're considered to be an experienced entrepreneur. So we have to have this perspective like Steve Jobs, whose next perspective was to jump right back in after failing, decide what you're going to do in your next attempt, what you'll do differently, focus on the future, because the future is what you can change, not the past. You learn from your failure, you learn from your past successes too, and that way you can replicate what has worked and eliminate what has not worked. Last thing I want to say about failure, because I'm going to talk about it more next month, is that, you know, you have a choice. There are two operating models for how you're going to think about failure. The first model tends to be the way we look at it. We see ourselves at a decision point, and we're either going to succeed or fail. We only see these two possible paths. But the second model is the one that's more accurate, and it's a healthier perspective to acknowledge going into any decision that you're going to make or any action that you might take. You see, right now, what's between you and success is failure. And if you can accept that, you're going to be liberated to try new things and to go ahead and take some risks. Success is the destination. Failure is the vehicle that you might have to hop right into in order to get to that place where you have success. Failure is not a possibility. It's a requirement if you want to succeed. Okay, so come back on August 1st. We'll talk more about that. But once we get fear out of the way, once we are able to deal with perceptions that we need to redirect, once we have an actual problem identified, now we're ready to fail forward and to start innovating. So let's shift gears and talk about that. Innovation, it's sort of a buzzword in business, and whenever I hear buzzwords, I like to strip them back to their original meaning. So straight to the dictionary, the word innovate, what that means is to introduce something new or make changes in anything established. That's all. That's all it means. It's not some big, sweeping, dramatic change. It's not some giant, huge thing that it's going to take an army of people to accomplish. It's not something that only happens once in a lifetime. Right? It's just to introduce something new, big or small, to make a change in anything that's already established. And in fact, incremental innovation is probably better. You can do it on your own. You can take charge of it. Step by step, small steps still equal progress toward the outcome that you want to achieve. And people are more likely to innovate when they see it as something small enough and manageable enough. People are also more likely to innovate when they are willing to question the status quo, to ask questions like, what's new? What's next? What could be better? What one little thing could change how we do things here in a way that's positive? And that would require challenging any long-held assumptions. It would require being open to thinking about new ways to do things. It would mean being okay with trying something, having a little different experience, even if it's a bit uncomfortable at first, even if it might not work, but you never know until you try. Even if you go into it taking that opportunity for a new experience just to see what you can learn from it. And as you step out of your comfort zone, you have the ability to be able to view things from multiple perspectives, from all angles, to invite some diversity of thought. You could ask yourself, right now, are you already innovating? This is just a little mini self-assessment here. Are you already innovating? Are you already challenging the status quo and looking for these little micro changes, these tiny little steps, these incremental improvements and small wins. Because even if you improve something a little bit, it's better than it was. We don't have to wait for somebody else to make the big sweeping changes that we often think about when we hear that word innovation. And are you already experiencing opportunities that come to you to look at things in a different way, to experiment and take some small risks? If so, over there on the left-hand side, you probably already have a growth mindset, and you're probably already set up to be innovative. But if you're on the right-hand side, which could be the fixed mindset at work, or it could be that you're in an environment where it doesn't feel safe, so you're just trying to do your best with what you have available to you, or you're just sort of accepting what is instead of what could be. If you're on the right-hand side, let me give you an exercise that some of my coaching clients think is a pretty valuable one. It goes like this. Make a commitment to yourself to find 10 minutes more that you can reclaim in your workday. It doesn't have to be 10 minutes all at once. It can be from a collection of little things just to get time back into your day. This is all about you. It doesn't require anyone else, and it has a payoff because, well, who among us couldn't use a little bit more time in our day? I'm going to give you an example. This comes from a client, and the client had this very same assignment. Go find 10 minutes that you can claim back into every day. And this is what she came up with. I like this one because it's just so simple. She found 15 seconds that she could save in her morning routine by rearranging some things in her bathroom. 15 seconds, that's a quarter of a minute out of the 10 minutes. And then she decided to drive down a different road to and from work, one that she didn't used to drive down because she used to like to go to a different coffee shop. She no longer went to the coffee shop, but she had continued using that route, which was a little bit longer. So she got 4 whole minutes back in every day by changing her route to and from work. She got 15 seconds back in her day by walking briskly from her car into the office. She had decided about trying to put off the start of her work day, and she decided to walk as briskly to work as she did at the end of the day, another quarter of a minute. She got a half a minute, 30 seconds, by clipping her ID, her work ID that was the security badge, I guess, to swipe to get into the office. She usually had to fumble for that at the bottom of her great big purse or in her bag. She carried 2 of them, versus clipping it to a certain place in her purse. She got 5 minutes back by setting up a spam filter and having less junk email to sort through. And she got 2 minutes back by scanning incoming emails in a time-bound way as opposed to just as however long it took. So I coached her to do some time binding, setting a limit on how much time she looked at her emails when she first came in. Now, those all sound like little things. They are. They're incremental improvements that ended up getting her 10 minutes in every day. That's, by the way, adding up to a lot of time. In fact, when you put it into a calendar for an entire year, she got a work week back. She got 40, actually almost 50 hours a year back into her work year. Now, of course, she didn't stop here. She found lots more things to do. I'm just encouraging you to do the 10 minutes a day so that you're able to get in the habit of incremental innovations and improvements, because then you can apply them in a whole lot of other places. Now let's go ahead and shift. So you're innovating. You've now got this mindset, this more growth mindset. You're solving the right problems. You've moved past the barriers, including a fear of failure. Let me give you 5 techniques that you can use on your own or with a team. We'll start with one that you already know, but I'm going to teach you how to do it better. This is good old-fashioned brainstorming. You've probably done this. Maybe you've even found it to be engaging and fun. But, you know, research tells us that only 1 in every 1,000 business problems is discussed, and even fewer are brainstormed. But brainstorming, it's a proven technique. It's paid off. It's paid off in all the ways you see on screen. 401k plans were developed in a brainstorming session where people got together to develop a new way to save money. Brainstorming is a great way to look for untapped opportunities. Procter & Gamble invented disposable diapers because of a brainstorming session. Beanie Babies were the result of discussions and brainstorming around developing a product that could become a marketplace leader. The inventor of Beanie Babies, he actually left that company and that brainstorming because they didn't fully adopt his ideas that he put on the table, and he continued some brainstorming and went off and started his own company too. You can increase productivity. Barcoding, scanners like the ones that scan your grocery items as you go through the checkout, those were invented as a result of a brainstorming related to, back in the day, microfiche data storage. Well, that was the result of a brainstorming session where people were focused on how to reduce the amount of paperwork. And fax machines came about in a brainstorming session about ways to make things easier for people, easier to receive data. All of those products came directly from a brainstorming session. Now, what do I even mean by brainstorming? Here's another one of those buzzwords. Let's go back to the original inventor, the father of brainstorming, a guy by the name of Alex Osborne. He said in 1941 that conventional business meetings are inhibiting the creation of new ideas. So he created this technique, and he defined it as getting a group to find a solution for a specific problem by amassing all the ideas spontaneously given by its members. And his premise was that the start needed was a way to nourish those ideas so that they could develop. And he created this little process to make that happen. You've been doing some brainstorming, but maybe you weren't using Alex Osborne's rules, which make your brainstorming a lot more effective. So in his successes with brainstorming sessions, here's what he did. He would bring a group of no more than 5 people together at a time. This would be like a focus group. If you have a team that's larger, you would do brainstorming in small groups. And he would bring those people together, no more than 5 people at a time, for no more than 10 minutes at a time. So brainstorming isn't meant to be some big belabored process. And what he would do in those 10 minutes with no more than 5 people in the room is he would introduce a problem. Introduce the problem and then capture every possible idea that was spoken aloud, no matter how outrageous or how mundane it might seem. There was no filtering, there was no editing, there was no discussion at all. Just this thought that all ideas are created equally and any idea could be valid. It might lead to something else. All we need is for people to throw those ideas out there to trigger thoughts of others so we can be building on those ideas. Everyone has to contribute. All the ideas are recorded somehow. That way, rather than rejecting them or judging them in the moment, they can be handled later. And you can then mine for what's behind the ideas and where you can go next. But first, it has to be this completely unedited process, about 10 minutes, 5 people. That's brainstorming. So if you do it, be sure and follow the original rules. Here's another idea, and these are all just easy things that you can do with any group. This is a good one for those times when you need to slaughter sacred cows, when you have long-held beliefs in your business or ways of doing things that are really entrenched and they're potentially in the way. A guy by the name of D. Hawk, the inventor of the credit card, he said, the problem is never getting new ideas. The problem is getting rid of the old ideas. So this technique of challenging facts, it might be useful to you because here we are at this rapid time of change everywhere, certainly in business, and it's only appropriate to challenge established facts because what was true yesterday may no longer be valid and true today. So you ask the questions, the ones that you see on screen, and you get people talking about this more openly, right? We're doing things a certain way. Why? What if we didn't do them that way? And those facts, our rationale for doing things the way we are, is that absolutely gospel truth today? Can we prove it? Those accepted facts, right, our predicate for doing things the way we do things, is that valid? You might look for that. And as you're doing that, as you're acquiring and evaluating that information, you're trying to reach some conclusions. As you're doing that, be really careful to avoid the decision trap known as confirmation bias, because that'll keep you mired in the past. Confirmation bias, it's the tendency that we all have to look only for information that agrees with the position that we already have on the issue. Right? We filter out, or we don't even look for information that contradicts what we believe. And that erodes the quality of our decisions. So we have to be really careful not to let confirmation bias get in the way. By the way, there are infographics about everything I'm talking about right now. I mentioned the critical thinking video series. I forgot to mention the failing forward infographic and these 5 different strategies. There's also an infographic about these for idea generation. So when you're brainstorming, here's another technique. You want to surface ideas that are different from your own. You can use these ideas to do that. You can appoint someone to be devil's advocate. That person is just supposed to poke holes and ask questions that are a little bit provocative so you don't end up with groupthink or with confirmation bias eroding the quality of your decisions. Maybe you break out into subgroups and you assign Group A, Group B, and Group C 3 different ways of looking at the problem, 3 different perspectives to force them to think more big picture. And you encourage people. You reward and recognize people who bring dissenting opinions, who are looking to be in the minority rather than too quickly going along with the majority or the consensus. Get those divergent opinions out there. The other 3 techniques, they're pretty quick. Here's one that I think is fun. You just pretend that you have a magic wand and that you can wave it and poof, here it is. Here's the perfect solution. What is it? That's the outcome that you're looking for. And now you work backwards. Instead of brainstorming, you're blame-storming. You're coming up with all the reasons why you're not already at that ideal future state. And once you have all the obstacles out in the open, then you figure out how to eliminate them. You don't accept them. That's just admiring the problem. If you're going to get to your perfect solution, since you don't have that magic wand, you've got to eliminate the problems. Name them and claim them and start working on them. Here's something that's also not new. This is over 2,200 years old, Socratic Method. This is based on the belief that all knowledge and all understanding is already within each of us, but we have to draw it out. We have to draw forth. You know, the word education, the root word is educar, which means to draw forth. And so we want to ask questions. We want to invite perceptions. We want to be open and let people hear what we're describing and then listen to them, echo it back to us, and let them ask questions, because all of that brings it out into the open in a way that you might not be doing now. This is not about bitching, moaning, whining about the problem. It's about dissecting it, and by being willing to look at it from all the angles. Last but not least, now that you've got that problem on the table, break it down. Literally do this on paper. Put it up in front of the room, because there's something powerful about doing it that way. You're going to take the problem, and it's going to be great big at the top of this funnel that you draw, but then you're going to break it down into a bit of the problem, not the whole thing, but something that's smaller than the whole. And then you're going to break down what you put in that second part of your funnel. You're going to break it down into something smaller. That goes in the third level of your funnel, and you've got the idea now. Whatever's in the third part, you break it down again, something smaller, all the way down to the bottom of the funnel. Now you've broken it down 5 times. You're narrowing it down. Yes, you left some pieces up there at higher levels of the funnel, and that's okay. They can go into their own funnel. But whatever you came out with at the end of the funnel, you narrowed it down to something now that's manageable, something that you can address, an incremental improvement that you can make, a small win that you could achieve. It's all progress. And you know, success breeds success. So start small, give people the opportunities to succeed, make things happen, and keep building from there. When you do the things I'm describing, you'll be more innovative and more creative. Creativity is not some natural-born characteristic that people have. It comes out of processes like the ones I've been describing. If you want some help doing this in your organization, call me. Let's do it. We can have a fun team-building session that is also productive. Before we do, we're going to strip it back and get to any root cause problems that you might have, and I'll teach you by example and collaboration how to do that along the way too. Go out and try some of these things. Be in touch with me. Let me know how they work for you. And if failure and the perception about it is the issue, come back next month and we'll keep talking about that topic. Thanks very much for attending today. Don't forget, post a little review for me. I believe I answered all the questions that have been posted. If any come up later, let me know.